appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route.
The President of the United States is dead.
Considering the number of enemies that he had, Lord knows they had reasons to get rid of him.
And I know that her face is down like this. She pushed him down and crawled out of the back to get a piece of skull off the back of the car.
Turned out that he left his tape recorder going when he left the room.
That bullet then traversed and moved backward. And then you do have the shot from the rear that struck him in the back, and I think there was another shot that hit him in the back of the head.
It didn't make any sense why one guy who suddenly went from having fired a rifle since the Marine Corps and suddenly was able to pull off world-class precision.
Was there a real thread of that fear running through the administration that perhaps a coup could take place?
He and Kenny O'Donnell were told they had to change their stories for the good of the country. He had to basically lie about what he saw.
Showtime. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Brent, Holland. Get in your most comfy chair, get the beverages going, get a tea, a coffee, or whatever you want to drink tonight. Settle in, get comfy. It's a cold, blustery night out there, and we're going to be discussing David S. Lifton. He is a renowned, legendary JFK researcher. I've had about 150, 160 guests on this show alone that have all referenced Best Evidence. It is a book that came out in the late 70s, early 80s that revived the JFK assassination. It was kind of winding down at that point, and suddenly Best Evidence appeared, and everybody said, what we've been thinking all along is actually true, and here's the evidence for it. There was a conspiracy in the JFK assassination. Tonight, we've got two of his best friends. David Lifton passed away suddenly. This was in 2022, and I thought a couple of years later, it's time to do an ode to David Lifton. So, Bill Blackwell, he was David's close friend and also his attorney, as he is with me as well. Jim Hoffman has a BA in history. He has taught social studies for over 35 years. He befriended David several years ago and has released a new book titled Conversations with David S. Lifton, Best Evidence to Final Charade. I want to start right away with Bill. Bill, how did you come to meet David?
Well, I had, this was 1988, I believe, and I picked up Best Evidence and had read it. My mom had first purchased the Mark Lane book for me when it first came out. Rush to Judgment. It was a topic that I got interested in, the assassination of Kennedy, and I started buying a few more books. And then I got glued to Best Evidence, and I read it in like 2 days. And especially when I got to the part, the thing that grabbed me was the corpsman that he found and did all the interviews with that were talking about the second ambulance and the casket that comes in with the president's body, and it's a shipping casket, and all these little interviews that he had with people that were just there doing their job. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't have any conspiracy in their mind, and of course they were all told they had to sign non-disclosure agreements afterwards. But and it was just fascinating stories to listen to all these people that were involved in some way, shape, or form. And I finished the book, and then I sent David a letter through the publisher, and I was curious as to why the Kennedy family hadn't done more investigation, or hadn't come out and dispelled or had accepted some of the topics that people had come up with. Look into the assassination more, I should say, and because they hadn't. And so I wrote him a letter to ask him this question, and he wrote me back. I got a letter back about a month later, and had his address on there. And I was able to, I wrote him another letter to his apartment and said, please call me. And he did. And I invited him over for dinner. I had a friend over that was interested in the assassination. And we had a beautiful night. And he told us a lot of stuff. And from then on, and he found out I was an attorney. And he had some stuff he wanted me to look into. And so, from that point on, I was his legal advisor, but more importantly, I was his friend.
Yeah. Jim, how did you meet him? How did you meet David?
Okay, so I, of course, like everybody else, I came across the book. I was trained as a social studies teacher. I have to admit, I'm embarrassed. I read the book, the textbook that said Oswald shot Kennedy, end of story, never thought about it. And then I had a student in Aurora, Illinois, where I used to work, Bonzi Valley High School, came up to me one day and said, hey, have you read this book? It was Best Evidence. I said, no, but I knew of it because in college, my roommate had read it and he said something about Grassy Knoll assassin. I'm like, what are you talking about? So anyways, she said, well, I'm going to go see him at, I think it was University of Illinois, Chicago. So I'm going to go see him. I'm going to try to get a picture with him and I'll talk to you tomorrow. And she did. And she showed me the picture. So at that point, I bought the book and then I was blown away. I wrote him a letter. He wrote me back. This was when he was on Olympic Boulevard. Fast forward to 2018, my buddy and I, we do films with our students. I'm a public high school teacher and he is too. And we work at different schools. We created what we call the David Lifton Project, and we had 2 schools involved. And we took a crew down. We had like 3 or 4 pre-production meetings. It was a big deal because my buddy Robbie Romero, who took the photo for that cover of that book, when we went and met Mr. Lifton in Las Vegas, he said, we got to do this right. So anyways, we go down there, and that's when I first met him. I was blown away. He's my idol. I mean, if I were an actor, it would be an actor. I'm a writer. He's my idol. And I cannot tell you, being able to meet him that in February 2018, it just blew me away. The audience can go to YouTube, type in David Lifton Project, Shadow Ridge School. He talks about his background, his family, Best Evidence, gets a little bit into final charade. He kind of walked up to the line and stopped. He didn't want to go into too much detail. But he later told me those kids were great. They did a great job. And it actually was in a film festival in London. The idea was we wanted the next generation, these young people, to know that he did this, the possibility our government has done this, and to never forget President Kennedy's legacy. So that's how I met him. And then later we drove up to Las Vegas where he lived. And I always tell people this, his apartment number was 1122.
No.
It was. And I said to him, I said, wait a second, 1122. I said, Mr. Lifton, do you understand the significance? He goes, I never thought of it. And I said, you're kidding. I said, no. I said, you don't think that's a sign? He goes, I don't believe in that. So, but anyways, I got to see him personally twice. We talked on the phone a lot after that 2018 February meeting where the kids interviewed him. I've told him the most important book. It's never been debunked. It's so heavily researched. It was so heavily vetted by the publisher in 1980. No question about it. It can't be debunked. It's fact.
His research was groundbreaking at the time. There's no question. And you're quite right. His interviews were exactly like Mark Lane's. I mean, they were riveting. Now, before we go any further, this next question's for Jim as well. When I mentioned that you were going to be coming on the show, Jim, you'll be glad to know you have your fans. Peter Dixon wrote me. Peter, if you're watching, thank you again for this question and being a fan. Please ask Jim to tell us everything he knows about the North Dakota trip and a certain agent. He will understand what I am referring to.
Okay. He's talking about what it's in the book, what Mr. Lifton would describe as Godzilla. Tyler Newcomb, Fred Newcomb's son, would know what that is. That Godzilla was the code name, quote unquote, that Lifton used with Tyler. And basically it's the idea, and I'm not 100% sold on this. There was shooting in the car, and that there were actually I guess there would be 3 drivers. Everyone knows Greer was the driver, and Lifton, it's in the book. He really believes there was the driver who was in North Dakota. I think he was in Miami. I tried to get a name from Mr. Lifton, and I'm sorry, I call him Mr. Lifton. I'm going to just continue to do that. I always call him Mr. Lifton, but I tried to get a name, and I never could really get it. Not that he didn't want to tell me or he didn't have a name. He had so much on his mind, and it wasn't really that important. And then he indicated to me, and it's in the book, there are some photographs where you can look them up, and you could see what the driver looked like. And so what this man is referring to is the guy up in North Dakota was the driver that when the car comes down, you have before Kennedy gets hit in the head. This is what Godzilla is. The driver turns around, and you could watch the Zapruder film. Mr. Blackwell and I have talked about this. It's not clear, but looks like the driver using his right hand turns around, possibly shoots the president. And Mr. Lifton said that if you watch Governor Connolly's reaction, he believes Connolly shot the driver, and then the car came to a stop. And there were many witnesses that said it came to a stop, it rolled, it almost came to a stop. Many, many witnesses, and I've got another source that I found just recently, a month ago, that it was a guy who was at AP, or he was like in charge of AP UPI, something like that. And I read the story, almost fell out of my chair. And he said, yeah, for some reason the car stopped. The Secret Service were in the car. That's literally what he said. I'll try to find that for you if you want to see that source. It blew me away. But anyways, so Godzilla is the driver gets shot. Paul Landis, who's still alive, Lifton believe ran, pushed the guy aside, and drove the car to the hospital. Paul Landis, by the way, was one of the quote unquote good guys, according to Lifton, had no involvement in the conspiracy. And then Greer was simply told, you're the driver. That's Godzilla. Now, what I find interesting, and Vince Palomara is the expert on this. I mean, he would know. Mrs. Greer, Greer was questioned by the FBI at the White House. They wanted to know how tall he was, his weight. I mean, it's like, why were they questioning whether or not he was the driver? It's very interesting. I did talk to Natalie Apteker, who was, I call her a Girl Friday for Mr. Lifton back in the 90s. And I called her up on the phone after Mr. Lifton had passed away. And I said, do you believe this? And she said, absolutely. And I said, well, what evidence is there? And she said, and I know Bill and I talked about this. She said, I read Governor Connolly's medical report, and his right hand, the fingers were broken. And she said, and what it indicates is that he had a gun, and the Secret Service grabbed his hand and squeezed it and broke his fingers getting that gun out of his hand. I mean, so that's what Peter's referring to is Godzilla. And it's in the book. I had a friend named Mark. He does not want me to use his last name. His dad is a famous musician. He said to me, Jim, what if Mr. Lifton dies, 40 some years of research gone? I said, I know. He said, you got to ask him, where's his manuscript? And so I asked Mr. Lifton many times, oh yeah, it's I got it in my computer. And finally I said, what if you pass away? Where is it? Do you have someone that can access it? He said, yes. I don't know who that person is or how that would be. But Mark said to me, you need to start recording this stuff just in case. And that's where that comes from. I started recording Zoom sessions with him. And my intention was, after his book comes out or after he passes away, I'll release it into, to YouTube. I have about, 15 or 20 conversations. And then I was thinking, you know what? No, I think it would be better justice for him if I did a book.
Folks, by the way, we're talking about David Lifton tonight and his research, his legacy to the JFK assassination for all of us. Bill Blackwell's with me, and also Jim Hoffman. Both were friends, close friends with David Lifton. And Bill, you had much the same conversation just prior to him passing away, that there should be some sort of backup available just in case for his manuscript. And goodness,
this was something that, this was something that I harped on him for 10 years. I took him to an attorney. While I was still practicing in Beverly Hills, I had a trust state attorney estate attorney in our suite of offices, trust wills and everything. And I took David up there and I said, listen, I go, you should donate all of this material to UCLA, to court, wherever you want to, but let's get this done. So when the day comes, because he was getting older and we're all getting older, but I go, the day's going to come where you're not here anymore. Let's get all this. And he hemmed and hawed, and it's just something that he didn't, for whatever reason, it wasn't, he knew it was important, but he couldn't take that final step. He had called me one night. This is when I was still in LA. So this is 17 years ago, 16 years ago or something. They were going to demolish his apartment that he had had since 1966 in Brentwood. And he had kept it all these years, and he turned it into it was his study. It was where he went to write and everything. And he says, I need to move everything. He says, well, they're going to knock down the building. I got a lot of stuff. I got all my photos. I got all my slides, a myriad of stuff. And I had a truck, and this was about 2 months before he had given him 60 days notice. And I said, okay, no problem. He said, I got a storage facility. It was off of Wilshire in Brentwood. And we made nightly trips. Putting stuff in my truck, and he put it in his car, he'd follow me. But when I first walked in there, it was like walking into the Louvre. I mean, it was like all this stuff that you had seen and this and that. In the right here back behind me is a diagram of DEALEY PLAZA. It looks just like what's behind James, that they used in the House Select Committee in the 70s. It's got everyone who was on the street, everything. So I'm giving this to James Hoffman to preserve whatever. He had gone out and he had bought a manular Concana rifle. And
this is the weapon, by the way, folks.
Isn't very good.
This is a replication of the weapon the alleged assassin.
It's a real rifle. It's a
used.
manular Concana rifle.
Yeah.
The same. And so I said, David, I go, what are you going to do? He said, I said, can I have it? He said, sure, take it. I don't like rifles or anything like that. So I have this. I'm going to give this to James. So for, down the road. And all kinds of stuff. I don't know why I kept this, but this was his parking permit at UCLA,
Wow.
and there was just stuff. There was all this stuff there, And so we started transporting all of this stuff, every, third night, and got all this stuff over to the storage facility. And he had hundreds of books. And so I was able to, I don't know, I probably picked up about 20 of them that I hadn't seen before. And so that was quite an endeavor, to do that. Now, all of that, which was his lifelong work, ended up somewhere in San Bernardino, Riverside County. He had a friend out there that purchased a storage facility, and he had told me the guy's name, and I don't remember it anymore. I wish I did, but he said he was going to store it all out there, and the guy was going to take care of it. I just don't know what happened to all this stuff. It was a treasure trove. It's sad that a lot of this stuff, went to the wayside. But
let's go to Jim. Jim, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I'm not sure. He threw out names to me. I do believe the storage facility was or is now in. And the reason is because when we did the interview, he goes, "Oh, let's go see my storage units." I think he had 3 of them.
Oh.
And so we go there, and of course, he forgot the key. So we got pictures, Robbie and I and the kids, in front of the storage facility. We didn't get to see it, but I think he said he had 45 file cabinets or something like that.
A lot of file cabinets.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Do either one of you know how he passed away? Has that come to light yet, or are we still in the dark about that?
I have no idea. Brent, you're the one that informed me that he had passed, and I know James has been in contact with his sister. And James, why don't you tell the audience what his sister gave you of that?
I forgot. Oh my gosh, you totally forgot.
David.
Yeah.
What did you get from her?
Yeah. So to answer your question, I don't know. I have a feeling it's a stroke. but that's my guess. One day she texted me and said, "Would you like his Cornell class ring?" And I said, you know, seriously? Yeah. I mean, and she said, "Okay, I'll send it to you." She said, because he's wearing it in the YouTube interview we did with the kids. And I was blown away. And when you look at the ring, I didn't even think it's at home, but it's so worn. He wore it all the time. You know, he was obviously very proud of it. And he said he was proud of Cornell. He said UCLA was kind of easy. He said he flunked courses at Cornell, you know. So anyways, yeah, I'm just, I was just so honored by his sister's gesture. And it means a lot to me because he was my idol, you know.
Jim, do you have any idea what may have happened to the manuscript or even the computer it may be on?
And my thinking is he's old school. His manuscript is, think of the outlines, the old outlines that we were taught to make. He's old school. He has out. I don't write like that. I write literally. I create a manuscript as I go. He didn't do that. So my guess is it's somewhere. It's in a laptop somewhere. His power, what do they call it? Air, Mac Air. And but whether or not someone can access it, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, my guess is it's probably, you know, I'm going to say 800 pages of outline. So whoever, and I would love if someone hears this and they know about this, I would love to be a part of taking that outline and turning it into a readable manuscript. I think that's what's going to have to happen. But my God, it would be well worth the effort. Because
it was 17 years of work.
17
years of work. And he would, I was honored. He would send me snippets. He'd be writing me and he'd call me and he'd go, "I want you to read this." I mean, he'd look at it as an attorney, tell me if it makes sense, and this and that. And he would send me snippets all the time. It was great. I get 1.5 pages of his writing, and James is right. He would write in an outline form as well, and so I miss those days.
We're going to come up to the end of the show in a few minutes, but I want to give you both about 2 minutes. I think to start with Bill. Bill, what was the essence of David S. Lifton? You knew him as a friend. You knew him as a client.
Well, first off, he was a very kind and gentle soul. And to me, he was, you know, one of the top 3 investigative, you know, historians ever in the history of the United States. When he was the first person to discover that the president's body is in the coffin as it's coming off Air Force One, people debunked him. They blew him up. They you know, they thought he was a nutcase. Well, now it's proven that was true. You know, so I enjoyed our conversations. I feel in some way I was a part of history to even know him, you know, and that's something to be able to say. I wanted to show this. This was a picture of David and I in my office.
Wow.
This was this was on April of 2008 because I had made a photocopy of the FBI report that David had found, and he was the only one that found it, that the 2 FBI agents had indicated, and it's underlined here. And let me just read this for everyone, that as the autopsy was starting, the doctor in charge indicated that there had been surgery to the top of the head, and that it was noted in the FBI report. So I got that. David autographed it here.
And that's what started it all, by the way, folks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's what started. That went way back.
Yeah.
So anyway, I miss him, and you know, America was better for him. You know.
Yeah. Jim.
Absolutely. And I got to say, I can't hold a candle to the relationship that Bill had with him, but I would say that I got to know him pretty well. We would talk a lot, sometimes 2-3 times a week. Right before he died, though, from November, we talked on the phone, I think once, texted a couple times, and then it was Thanksgiving, and I was so busy, and he wanted to do like a Zoom session. I didn't have the time. And I want everyone to know I begged him, please let me help you with your manuscript. And he would, he'd say, I'm okay. And I know Bill, did the same thing. And he was, I'm okay. But I want, if I could, this is my last text to him. And because this is about him. And I'd like to read it. And it says, "Good morning. I hope all is well, Mr. Lifton. I'm sorry I've not been able to speak to you. I've been really so busy this past month. Please let me know how you are doing." And I sent it December 8th, 7:27 a.m. and he died December 6th. So he never got to read it. And to this day, it bothers me. I feel like I wasn't there for him. But I didn't know. I knew I knew he was old, but I didn't think he would be gone so quickly. So I miss him, and he made an impact on my life, and I mean, oh my God, he made an impact on so many people, and as Bill said, America's better that he existed. I will say I wanted to say this because at the end he did get really very personal, and he said, I wish I had had a family, but he couldn't do that. And I realized he made a huge sacrifice. He gave up a family to do the research, and people need to understand that. He couldn't do it both ways. And he was lonely in the end, and he understood that. But, you make that choice in life, and he had to do it. And thank God he did it, because we would be in the dark about all this stuff. But he paid a price for it.
Brent, I wanted to mention something. The last interview that we had with David and I and you had one of the last questions you had asked me, because I had to leave early, was, is there anything that still could happen legally with regards to this? And I basically said, not really. But I will. And David said, well, he felt that because of people still living and still spouting off stuff that isn't correct. He thought maybe there was something there. But I will tell you this, and it hit me afterwards. There was no federal crime at that point in time with regard to shooting a president. This was under Texas state law. This was a murder that happened under the laws of Texas. The murder's never been solved. That there's no statute of limitations on that. Yeah. So I wanted to clarify that it's not going to happen. But if somebody in the state of Texas ever wanted to open up an investigation, this is still an investigation that's on the books that's could legally go forward.
I want to thank both of you for coming on the show tonight. Most grateful for your input.
Thank you.
And I am so happy we got to do this together. I miss David. I wish David was here. I was so honored, Bill, back in the day. This is how Bill and I met. On my shelf up here is David's book, Best Evidence. I can't picture it. I can't get it. But, and I had held it up in a show. And next thing I know, I got a beautiful email from Bill. We become friends. That's over, oh my God, Bill, a long time ago.
let's not say how many years.
This hair wasn't this color. Let's put it that way. And I wasn't wearing these. So I just want to thank you for that, Bill. And David came on and he was most graceful, and he just was so giving. He didn't really care that he was coming on a show like this or anything like that. And I just want to say this about his legacy. The bottom line, if it wasn't for David Lifton, the quest for the truth in the John F. Kennedy assassination would have faded decades ago in the 1970s. He revived it and brought it back to the forefront. David asked the most uncomfortable questions mainstream hides from, and he demanded answers. We as a community owe David a great debt, and all the pioneers before us. We call that chutzpah, ode to David Lifton. I'm Brent Holland from The Brent Holland Show. See you soon.